Clay, I have to ask a question here. I think this is the first time in this episode that the Xindi are having an intra-Xindi conversation, and one of them calls Degra, the guy Xindi, a humanoid Xindi. I feel like we have this conversation all the time. I thought they were... Who are the arboreal Xindi? Those are the sloth guys, I guess, the arboreal ones. Have we encountered a name for the other guys, the guys that look like humans to this point? Because humanoid doesn't make any sense. They're all humanoid except for the swimming guys. So I don't know why they would pick out that. And also, linguistically, it doesn't make a lot of sense that they would call him a humanoid, seeing as they just discovered humans. And are they inferring... I watched that scene going, are they inferring that he's a traitor somehow? Or are they calling him a humanoid Xindi and that's a bad thing because he looks like a human? But I don't know. It's where I wanted to start with. I don't think it has much to do with the episode, but I couldn't remember if you remembered if they had a name for that Xindi species to this point.
If you are relying on me to remember, that's your first mistake. But yeah, I also thought that was kind of weird to use that as a slur against him when it's like, if you're standing on 2 feet, if you're represented as a guy in a suit, you're a humanoid monster.
Yeah, the bug Xindis are humanoids in this. There's no, I think only, arguably, even the swimming fish guy is somewhat humanoid looking.
Well, yeah, they got
arms.
They got a humanoid arms and rippling chest muscles
and a face. Yeah. Ready to talk about Proving Ground. It's the next Star Trek Enterprise episode. So let's take a break. We'll play a clip from the episode, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Your world is in jeopardy, and where are your friends? The Vulcans. Where is their mighty fleet? They couldn't even spare one officer. She was forced to abandon her career to remain on your ship. A remarkably selfless act for a Vulcan. But we've come to your aid. We've come into the Expanse when they refused. We're here to help you. If you don't want our assistance, then we'll leave you to deal with the Xindi on your own. Just like the Vulcans have done.
Proving Ground is the 13th episode of the 3rd season of Star Trek Enterprise. Came out on January 21, 2004. It is 4 out of 7 in the Vulcan versus Andoria arc. It is 14 out of 28 in the Xindi Crisis, halfway through the crisis. Written by Chris Black, directed by David Livingston. In-universe date is known. It's December 6th, 2153, coming up on Christmas. Hopefully they have a very Merry Christmas and they wrap up the Xindi arc before then. In this episode, an Andorian ship commanded by Shran unexpectedly appears in the Expanse to help the Enterprise locate the Xindi primary weapon. I like how they call it primary instead of the biological weapon that they've been working on.
Hey, man, that time spent in Detroit was not wasted.
No.
Oh, wait, it was.
Well, not for us. Not for the podcast. Not for the listeners. First, very minor point to get out of the way. They ruined what could have been a terrific reveal of Shran with the antenna over Archer's head by showing you that Shran was in the episode in the cold open. Why did they do that? That was such a cool shot, and that would have been so much fun to not know who was coming and to be like, oh, it's him. Why did they do that? Idea.
Just 'cause I guess they needed to use him as a hook for the cold open, but
they should have reconsidered. They should have reshot Archer making eggs or something to kill that 2 minutes of opening, because that was too good of a camera thing. I don't think I've ever seen them do anything like that in Star Trek, and to have it not pay off the way that they wanted it to.
It only would have been better if Archer had his back to the screen. Yeah. So and so you see the antenna come up, and then you see the look on his face when he hears the voice or something. And then, no, I thought the same thing. I understand leading with him, because as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, okay, this one should at least be enjoyable to watch. So I guess he's a good hook, but yeah, it is a unfortunate, especially because the way that they do it, it's purely for the audience.
No, right? Like that's why it doesn't work at all, because it's just a audience joke, not an audience joke, but a trick on the audience and not Archer.
Yeah, if they had done it with Archer's back to the screen, it would have been a little bit more on him as well.
Yeah.
But that's true. It's purely for the audience. Yeah.
Yeah. I I know that there's obviously complicated production things. Like they probably wrote the script and didn't think of this camera move as they were doing it, and then they shot it, and then they're like, oh well, that ruins that thing, even cool as it is. But I thought it was cool enough where they should have just come up with a new 2 minutes of opening and just rebuild around that. Because
guys, we have to get this done in 4 days, but what we need to do also is spend 2 of those days rewriting the first 10 minutes. And nobody can go home and see their family for the next week.
That cold open wasn't necessary. You could sprinkle the rest of Shran's stuff into it, and it would have been fine. Very minor point. I like this episode quite a bit. What did you think about Proving Ground?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is probably the best, for me anyway, the best Xindi arc episode so far. I could be forgetting some because I'm sure I may have said that once before in the past. But
how are you defining a Xindi episode, I suppose? Because some of them have just archers say, we're chasing the Xindi in this episode.
No. I'm thinking of it in terms of an episode that is purely about moving that story forward with involving the Xindi, involving the weapon, coming into contact or conflict with them in some form. This is the most satisfying one they've done. And Shran is no small part of that because he's great. The story they tell with him, the double dealing on his end is really good. Even the ending, where I'm not totally sure if Shran sent them that stuff or if it was what the female
Andorian. I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember what her name was.
Yeah,
whether it was her because she's sweet on Malcolm. You know what I learned? There is a YouTube guy who's like a grill master whose name is Malcolm Reed.
Oh, nice.
And my friend told me that, and I was like, that's really interesting. How much pineapple does he use in his recipes?
You can use a lot of pineapple when barbecuing in Australia. I know that's a thing. You put a little cucumber, a little pineapple on there, grill it up nicely. It'll be very tasty. I have to say that I think it's good to start at the beginning with this one because I think that this episode's kind of interesting in some ways. This is the longest previously on I think they've ever done.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny. When I watched the last episode, Netflix auto played into the next one and it didn't do the recap. So when I went back to actually watch it this time, it restarted from the beginning and did a very long recap, which I actually excuse me.
That's true for me too. I remember that. I remember I let it run for too long and I heard Shran's voice immediately kick in. Yeah. So
but
they
I was
don't
actually
do the recap.
happy.
Yeah, that's weird.
I was happy that they did the recap because it did catch me up to speed in a way that I generally am not.
So I have a question. I thought that the previously on in this episode, it either did a very good job of summarizing what was going on, or it exposed a problem in the show in that I didn't get the connectivity. How do I want to say this? I want to say this without sounding like I don't know what the show is doing, which is not the case. I understood everything that was going on in that sequence. I understand the interconnective nature of this. Seeing it in a condensed form made it seem more like there was a point to what was going on than having all those separate scenes and storylines strung across 10 episodes. Does that make sense? Like it was constructed in a way that I feel that they just spread out the Xindi stuff a little bit too much, and that there is a through line to everything, going from like finding the anomalies to finding that scientist to creating that radioactive waste or whatever they use to track it down to finding the weapon and all that stuff. But I think that the previously on led into a good perception of this episode for me, and that it felt like the Xindi arc was finally doing something in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I just feel I feel like the summary was nice because it consolidated what I felt could have been 2 or 3 episodes worth of time. And it just made it be like, okay, this is the story so far. The show has just been killing time to get to this point, really. Or it's been realizing that it has an episode order that's so large, it has to really really sprinkle in this stuff in a way that while you're watching the episodes doesn't feel satisfying because it's so little over it.
Yeah.
And I felt that was the problem, and that's what this kind of rectified for me.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit of, and maybe this is just the problem with recaps like this in general, or the way these things are laid out in general, but it reminded me about what we would say about Discovery, where it was, we'd say, if you haven't watched an episode, excuse me, Jesus. If you haven't watched an episode before this one, the recap makes it sound like it's been a nonstop action party and all of this really important stuff has happened. But having watched all the episodes, you know how thinly spread this stuff was over the previous episodes.
Right. In Discovery's case, it kind of consolidates a lot of nonsense into the one stream of consciousness decision making that they want you to focus on.
Yeah, and yeah, here it was a nice condensing of everything down, and it does make you wonder why they spent so much time in the Old West when you're watching this thing going like, okay, yeah, I see what's going on here. This is all right. You got to get these guys. They got a big weapon. We got to stop that weapon. They got 2 weapons. It's crazy.
Well,
primary and otherwise.
I guess here's the other point to it where I think that there's a mistake that they made. What they should have done, I think, and this is obviously hindsight is 2020, but what this episode proved to me is that the Makos are unnecessary in this show. What should have been there from the start is 1 Vulcan ship and 1 Andorian ship go with the Enterprise to try to do whatever's going on out here, right? Because I think the reason that this episode succeeds is that it finally introduces some sort of relevance to Star Trek as a franchise into this Xindi arc, right? Like, so the prequel nature of these guys, the Andorians, the Vulcans, and humans somewhat getting along but not really getting along, is fertile ground for the conflict that can happen along the way to finding the Xindi. You know, like there's a Shran at odds with the Vulcans and Archer being in the middle and trying to mediate these points of view. There's a lot of, as this episode develops, like the Vulcans are or the Andorians want to get this weapon so that they can tell the Vulcans to stay away from them, basically. Like there's a race for this to defend themselves. So, selfish decision-making being made, not at the greater good, but for the one species over another type thing. The Makos were kind of introduced as that they would be this like stick in the mud or burr in the fur or whatever of the characters, that they would interfere with the smooth operations of everything that's going on. They haven't done that. The Makos are clearly just a wallpaper type change that the show wanted to make. But
Kirk, have you ever run out of pre-made tea in the cafeteria while everyone else fights the Xindi?
Shran, the Vulcans, and the humans have a natural antagonism towards each other that can carry episodes.
Yeah.
And they should have done it from the start. So that would have been the change that I would suggest.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I think it's I think having 3 ships worth might get too cluttered, given that they are doing so much like episodic stuff still. You kind of, that gets tougher to do if you've got to deal with 3 ships at the same time.
It does, yeah.
But I totally understand what you're saying. The problem with this arc, as we've said multiple times, is it seems like this Xindi arc should be about really putting to the test the Starfleet ideals and stuff in this, when they're in this situation that is very much a military situation. And that's what the Makos are there for, is to be that pressure, the more military pressure. And they just never do anything with it. And it's just same old, except Archer's mad all the time. Speaking of that, this is the first episode where I thought his change in attitude worked. Yeah,
I'd agree. I think there's maybe one or two scenes where I thought he was overly angry, but the rest of it I thought he was appropriately curt with people, I guess. He wasn't raging, but he was like, we got stuff to do. We got to get it done.
Yeah, they needed a foil, because so much of this story is them, well, I guess this is the key with all Star Trek, but so much of this story is them flying through the Expanse that they need some sort of ethical foil, or foil of any sort to really get some good drama out of these stories. And the Makos could have done that, but they didn't. And the Andorians, when they show up, I think do. And they do one of those things where it's like the whole season has been the Enterprise just slugging it out through the Expanse and barely holding it together, and then the Andorians are like, we have a better ship, it's no problem for us.
Yep.
We got here, we're much faster, we got here in 25 minutes. You've been doing this for 6 months. But it's a nice it feels more Deep Space Nine-y, because you've got these multiple races that are involved with each other, and the humans and the Andorians are kind of allies, but not totally allies. And you've got T'Pol in there which is interesting because the Andorians hate the Vulcans.
Yep.
You've got interesting things going. There's a lot of plates spinning at once, and it makes for a very interesting story because, in a way that it focuses the drama of the story in a way that these Xindi episodes haven't been focused.
Yeah.
Because they were previously so kind of amorphous as to what they were doing, other than we gotta get them.
Yep.
We gotta stop them. We gotta find this thing. That only gets you so far, but if you keep doing that, it gets old. But it's got your weapon MacGuffin in the middle. You've got 3 people or 3 groups who are all kind of vying for control of this thing. 4 if you want to count the rest of the Xindi and the quote unquote humanoid ones.
Yep.
And their approach to how this thing is going to work. For the record, by the way, looked like it worked pretty good. I mean, it didn't explode that moon, but I don't think the human race is surviving whatever that thing does to Earth.
No, you're not going to plant a flag on that moon after what they did to it. Yeah, I mean, they assume that it fails. The other kind of funny thing that I felt was pretty much of a stretch was when it fails, Archie goes, "Oh, this is all thanks to that Xindi." It's like, that's a leap, Archer. Like you have no reason to believe that that's the case. This could have failed for any number of reasons. Maybe they had a faulty spark plug or something and it failed. But Archer seems convinced that it's the arboreal guy. But I take your point that the weapon seems like it's pretty good. I think that what I think that this one brings to it is the show in this season have had like a real dearth of good characters. We always come up with the joke of like, oh, it's another vaguely militaristic alien colony that they've got to deal with. The show hasn't really had a good time or an easy job developing even the main cast members of Enterprise into something that you can identify as a character. Shran is interesting because people love him. I love Jeff Combs. I don't know about Shran as a character, really. Shran as a character to me is, as we said when we first got introduced to him, he's kind of just a generic thug character, and he's played by a good actor. And this episode gives him a little bit of breathing room where it's clear that Shran is not all happy with the mission that he's on. He feels a sense of betrayal to be doing this to Archer, even though he is going to follow his instructions. But what Shran does is, because Combs is playing him, he actually feels like a person in this show in a way that a lot of them don't. And even though I don't find him particularly interesting, and particularly in comparison to Wei-Yun, who I think is both a well-acted and a well-written character at the same time, Shran just sticks out because he's much better than what the show usually puts out for you. And even though I don't find his storyline particularly innovative or unexpected, it's a nice thing to just have a storyline that I can understand what's going on and feel like it's being executed well. And that's where I think that this one succeeds.
Yeah, I think Shran, Jeffrey Combs is the best thing that could have happened to that character. Because he plays him kind of like Garrick a little bit. Where he's got that sort of, everything he says kind of has a little bit of stank on it as far as whether or not he's being fully truthful.
Yep.
And I think that's the performance more than it is the writing on the page. I mean, I'm sure it's a combination, but I think somebody else probably doesn't play him as well.
Yeah. I think I think that just the fact that you can bring a character who has a previous reputation, he has the reputation of the Andorians or whatever, and the Vulcans are involved. The reason that I think bringing those two in, the Vulcans and the Andorians, into the season earlier, and as I'm thinking, like, it's irrelevant, but as I'm thinking of it now, there are ways that you could write that to happen, and they say, in episode 3 of the season, they say, let's split up to search the Expanse more quickly, and we'll reconnect over here or something in a month. I just like the fact that the title of the episode is Proving Ground, which is obviously talking about the testing site for the weapon, but it's also the setup for the proving ground of what the relationship between these cultures is supposed to be like going forward. And like when this series actually ends, that this group turns into something called the Federation because they learn to work with each other. I just think that the Xindi arc would have been much more... you could get away with the Xindi being relatively stupid and cardboard thin as they are if there was a arc of the Federation being built underneath that, leading to it. And that would take the place of Xindi development, which still don't really have. You thought they were going to do some kind of 9/11 allegory, but the show is clearly too scared to talk about that stuff. So it's like, well, I don't want to touch any live wires here politically, so I'll just do generic Star Trek episodes with a Xindi story in the background. But these characters in this culture are semi-designed to be a trifecta of antagonism towards each other. They feed off of each other, and they're not races that get along naturally. So it makes sense that this would be the proving ground for how the Federation is built on this mission, going into Xindi space to find this group. And it really just sticks out to me that this episode proves what the weakness of the rest of the season has been. It's just been kind of empty in a way that this show shows you that it could have been about something.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree with all that. Because the Xindi thing is a pretty thin MacGuffin as it is, and that's all it really is something to chase down. And when you have, like you're saying, when you have something like that, which is that thin, you have to find the story elsewhere, and it's usually
the journey instead of the result of finding this orb of death.
The Maltese Falcon isn't about finding the Maltese Falcon. It's about all of the twists and turns and character interactions that happen in pursuit of it. This show is like if the Maltese Falcon was about Humphrey Bogart driving down the highway, stopping periodically to ask if they've seen the Maltese Falcon. And then every now and then someone's like, yeah, well, I saw one guy with a black bird about 25 miles down the road that way. Yeah. And like, excellent.
Engage.
A western town. What? This week, the Maltese Falcon takes me to Detroit.
The problem with the Xindi, I suppose, is that the Xindi have really just been when you think back on it, every scene with the Xindi is them in their little room, and one of them goes, "Is the weapon ready yet?" And they go, "Not yet." And they go, "Why isn't it ready yet? What's happening with the weapon? Is it ready yet?
Should we make a second weapon? You can't make a second weapon. But what if we go back in time?"
What's sort of bad, what's good for this episode and sort of bad for the Xindi is that I felt like this was the episode that actually gave us something about the Xindi, and I'm not even really sure that it gave us anything about them. It had yet another scene of them bickering about whether or not the weapon was ready, but it also had a testing situation, and this Degra guy seems to be the only Xindi that's going to matter. He's the only Xindi who has a name, I think, to this point, so
Is he the guy
he's the humanoid guy.
Test?
Yeah, he runs the test. He seems clearly the one that they're going to stress the most because he's named at this point. I still don't think they give you that much, but I don't really have any. There's not much else to add on to that. Like if you just have this weak ass Xindi story and the weak Xindi appearances, you rely heavily on Shran and T'Pol and Archer to make up the difference. And I thought they did here in an episode that's not novel and not totally original in any way. It's just solid, and it makes it through it.
Yeah. I was, and I don't know if it's mainly because Jeffrey Combs is so magnetic when he shows up, but I was more engaged with this episode than I probably have been in, I don't know, a while.
Yeah,
in this show.
Interesting. Do you think the plot was any great? Were you into the plot, or you think it was just like a familiar face showing up? You're like, oh, I know this thing, and I know what's going to go on.
I do think the plot was part of it, because I think, but and what makes it work is the infusion of Shran and the Andorians, where you are not totally sure what way they're going to go, because I think it works particularly in this series because up to this point there has been such a poor record of what happens when you let alien species onto the ship.
Yeah.
So part of me was like, well, I mean, the Andorians, they're probably just going to not, I don't know. It could go either way, really. And, they're kind of making it seem a little bit suspicious, but they're doing a really good job of evening it out by having them be upfront about stuff.
Yeah.
And at this point, I don't know what Shran's ulterior motives could be. And when you find out that he's trying to, I figured it out before they kind of came out with it for the most part, but still, I think it works. When you find out, it's a really good reason. It's a very realistic, real world kind of reason where it's like, well, technically we're not hurting you guys because we got the weapon away from them. We're just not going to give it to you because we realize
we need it.
If we have it, then that protects us from the Vulcans, and that levels the playing field for us. And it's not that the Andorians are evil characters in this situation.
Right. Yeah.
It's just they are taking advantage of the situation. They're still helping to an extent.
Yep. helping until the job is done, and then taking advantage of where the ball lies at the end of the game.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
And I really liked the kind of standoff with Shran and Archer at the end, because I honestly wasn't sure who was going to blink, if anybody was. I was legitimately surprised that they actually blew the weapon up, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Although I did think, like, what, are they just going to keep this in the fucking garage for the rest of the series?
Break glass in times of need. I agree with you. I think that what I like about the Andorians in this one is that about until you're halfway through, I wasn't sure if the suspicion of the Andorians was just because that's the way the culture acts. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like it's hard to tell if the Andorians are being shifty or if they are actually trying to help, because they're all very prideful and they're all very stubborn and not willing to help people. So even like the female Andorian who helps Reed rebuild his stuff, there's a sense of not really being sure what she's up to. She doesn't want to help, but you don't know why the reason she doesn't want to help is. Is it because it's like an Andorian cultural pride thing, or is it because she knows that she's just going to betray these people or whatever? So I think it plays itself out nicely.
You can see Rick's influence on the series is waning, that this time the female Andorian was fully covered up.
Yeah, I know. Not even hints of passion, I suppose.
But they do make a double entendre about aligning the relays. So at least that's how it played to me. I don't know. Maybe I just got Berman on the brain.
What was that line? I forget what he said.
I don't know. It was one of those things where it's like Malcolm was like standing too close to her, and he's like, well then, let's get to aligning those relays, or something like that.
Oh, I remember. I'm remembering now. There was another line where she's talking about like she's like, it's not about the size of your missile, it's about the man who wields it, or something like that.
Right,
I was like, oh, yeah. Rick furiously running in, waving a handwritten script pages.
I got blue pages. Blue pages. Shut it down. We gotta move the air thing to the beginning of the episode, so we got more time for the entendres.
In some ways, I think that the female Andorian and the Archer and Shran relationships, my biggest technical problem with this, and I think it's bigger than technical, I think it ties into Archer, is they don't effectively... I don't really buy that Archer planned to track what they were doing on the Enterprise with Archer at this point. I don't
Yes.
know. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's supposed to be Archer's developing and learning that he needs to keep an eye on people when he's doing stuff. But through the entire 2.5 seasons we've seen so far, I have not been convinced that Archer's learned this lesson yet. So when the episode needs to wrap up and Archer's like, aha, that's why I had Malcolm check what you're doing back there, Shran, so that I could pull the rug out from under your feet. I go, that feels really writerly. That feels really scripty that you needed to do that at that point.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I wasn't totally sure why that was a gotcha moment, because from the beginning, Archer's like, all right, when they get here, make sure we have crew members watching them at all times. And then the whole story on the ship is how the female Andorian is like, why do you need to be watching us at all times?
Right.
And then at the end, he's like, yeah, no, we figured out what you're doing because we were watching you the whole time. And Shran's like, I didn't realize you were watching us.
Is that Archer developing, or is that just? Do you know what I mean?
No, I don't think not really, because
Okay.
it's like, why didn't he do? I mean, it depends on how much you want to extrapolate that out. Because I mean, on the one hand, yes, maybe, but on the other hand, like I said, every single other time he's let an alien onto the ship, he's like, these guys seem great.
Yeah.
Don't hassle them, and then someone ends up either pregnant or dead.
Yeah. I feel that there is room to say that that's Archer learning something. I think maybe if the earlier episodes had been executed better, where Archer becomes a little less naive as he was in the first 2 seasons, that you could be like, oh, he's actually learning to not do it. But it didn't feel, as you say, it doesn't feel surprising when it happens, but it also feels somewhat sudden and random that's the key to solve the problem, is that Archer's like, yeah, we watched you and we made sure that we had the code to do what we needed to do. I don't know.
Yeah,
I found it unsatisfying, I suppose.
It's not exactly the coded messaging that Scotty gives to Kirk to fool Khan in Wrath of Khan. But I don't know if it's him learning as much as he's right to be wary of the Andorians, and I guess he's kind of learned in that regard, where they've encountered them enough that he doesn't totally trust them, and he doesn't totally trust them here. And I think it works out. I think I don't really have a problem with it, because it's fine, whatever. Well, you got to get to that point. I don't think that needs to be like a big belabored point.
I like that point. I think there's a sort of sophistication to the point that if Archer is learning this lesson, that the Federation isn't about everyone adopting common goals, but it's about learning how to work with people that you disagree with on some way. If it's not about,
the answer is you don't trust them.
If it's not a big, because I think what Star Trek would kind of expect in the way that the Next Generation and everything portrayed is that it's kind of like a kumbaya moment where everyone comes together and it's like, we're all united and we're the Federation. We all share core values and things like that. I think that what Enterprise did at least a decent job of showing is that that's not really the case with the species early on. They're fairly antagonistic towards each other. And I think that you could say that Archer's learned a lesson that in order to work with the Andorians, he needs to understand how Andorians act. He needs to understand that the dog will bite, and by doing that, you're allowed to work with them and not be surprised by what might be the outcome. It's kind of like the human and Klingon relationship. You're antagonistic, but you understand how to work with each other and get the job done later on.
Yeah. It's, I mean, it is interesting from the standpoint of like you were saying, the traditional Star Trek message is one of total acceptance and everybody's equal and stuff, but it doesn't really start to feel realistic until you've got this environment where these different planets are working together, but they're always like, just watch out, the Klingons are probably gonna fuck us. And so you just work that into the paperwork where it's like you're not offended when it happens,
right?
It's just like, yeah, I knew you guys were gonna do this, so we put some stuff in place so we could avoid it and not get railroaded here. It doesn't mean we hate you or anything. Well, Kirk does, but it doesn't mean we hate you or anything. It's just like that's how you are.
Archer was the
It would be nice if there was a flip side to that, where it was like someone was finally like, yeah, we knew you were going to try and fuck us, Starfleet. Yeah. So we worked it in that we
would get ours. That's what the Maquis were supposed to be.
That's true.
Yeah. For the first couple seasons, Archer was the frog in the tale about the scorpion and the frog, where the scorpion wants to cross the river and the frog comes up to him and the scorpion's like, can I ride you across the river to get to the other side? And the frog says, no, you'll sting me. And the scorpion says, I promise I'm not going to sting you. And so he says, okay. And so the scorpion hops on the frog's head and they go out and they're halfway across the river and the scorpion stings the frog. And as the frog is dying, he says, why did you do this? You're going to drown as well. And the scorpion says, it is my nature. It's that parable. It's just you have to, Archer was the frog for the first couple of seasons of Enterprise. And eventually he learned to wear a hard hat so the scorpion couldn't stab him, I think, on the top of his head. And that's what this episode is. I don't know why the scorpion did just wait till they got to the other side before he did that. He's not thinking ahead. He's not thinking ahead. Archer wasn't thinking ahead either, inviting all these aliens onto the ship. Yeah. Anything else about Proving Ground? A couple of minor weird points. One that we just talked about. I think I found the Archer thing unsatisfying because I was expecting, and I don't know if this makes it a better episode, that Shran's tortured conscience was going to play into the ending. And I'm kind of glad it didn't, because I think that makes it more interesting. But I wasn't expecting Archer to say, I watched you type your PIN number into the ATM and now I know the code. Yeah. I was more expecting him to play up like, Shran, how could you... I helped you on Vulcan. I exposed that spy base, and this is how you're going to fuck me over here in the Expanse. And Shran having some sort of waver in his devotion or whatever. And the only other thing, I was convinced when they stole the sphere and they got away that this was all some Xindi plot to put a bomb on the Enterprise or something, because they're like, no ships are chasing us. I was like, why are no Xindi chasing these guys? That was the only other thing. That nothing really said about it. I was just surprised by those two turns of events. I actually like that it's not Shran. It's not Archer appealing to Shran's more honorable nature, because I think that's I find Archer's actions here to be the most convincing version of, Archer has changed character now. Yeah, that they've done, because it results in an action. Like, he's actually doing something and acting in a way that's different than he would normally have acted. Instead of just walking in from stage left with his angry face on. Yeah. And it's like, he's a different guy now. He's legitimately going to blow that ship up for the greater good of Enterprise, to make sure that weapon doesn't get out of their hands or whatever. Yeah. And I find that to be so much more convincing than anything they've done with him up to this point. For the most part, like some of the more, at least action-wise, some of the more heady conceptual stuff, he's had some interesting character turns. But as far as like Archer in a pressure situation in command of the Enterprise, this is the most convincing I've been by his change of character. Yeah. Yeah, and I thought Bakula was good in this one for the most part. He wasn't overly angry, as you say, but there is a sense of urgency with what they're going through. My only other thing... Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, I really just have minor points now. I was mildly concerned when it opens after the deletion episode of something that I liked when they deleted the data. And suppose, like, we found 57% of it. We're back on. It's like, that's what a way to shoot yourself in the foot. I didn't like that at all. Yeah, my only other thing, this is not an issue, but it's a storytelling clarity thing for me, was I had no clue how big that sphere was supposed to be. Because when they show it suspended in space as it's shooting the moon, I'm thinking this thing is absolutely fucking huge. Yeah. And then Archer's like, well, we can put it in the cargo bay. And I was like, what? It's like the size of like a car, I guess. Yeah.
It was there wasn't any scale there to
also
show how big it was.
Yeah, and also when the sphere launches, it comes out of like a mounting thing.
Yeah,
that for me implies that it's huge. It can't just be sitting there. Like I don't know. It was weird. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's just a
This is just the baby one. This is the test. The Xindi are sticklers for testing. They really.
Yeah, well, you're gonna shoot the devil in the back. You better not miss. Just kill 7 million people the first time and then finish the job later.
Yeah, finish it later. Anything else to say about the Xindi? I mean, I feel I don't have a lot to say about them, but would you agree that this is the most we've seen from them in some way? It felt different, even though they were literally saying the same things to each other. So I don't know if you felt any different about them.
Well, yeah, it feels different because generally the scenes with this council are like post-action or pre-action scenes. And it's usually just like, how could you let this happen? Or we need people to do X, Y, and Z. Why are you not pulling your weight? This one, they're actually involved with the story that's being told because there's conflict among them about the weapon and stuff. And so it feels like it's more integral to the story than just a prologue or a tail end thing where, Ragin tells them that she got body scans of everybody for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. I don't have anything else to say about Proving Ground, I don't think.
It's good. Liked it.
Yeah. Final thoughts, I think, will be a good place to catch up because I'm not sure I've explained why I like this one as clearly as I wanted to, but I'll wait until final thoughts. So let's take a break. We'll play a clip, read patron thoughts after that, then give our final thoughts about Proving Ground.
So, anything we need to worry about?
Your lateral array was out of alignment. I corrected it. All other systems are functioning properly. I'd take this ship into combat myself.
Even with our primitive weapons?
It's not the weapon. It's the soldier who wields it.
Thank you very much for listening to the show today. We talked about Proving Ground. If you want to support the show, you enjoyed it enough to want to support it, you go to patreon.com/The Penske File. It's the best way to do it. A couple of bucks a month, and you get extra content, extra podcasts. You get the ability to vote in polls. You get the live streams occasionally that we do. There's a whole bunch of stuff. There's like 100 podcasts out there now that you can sign up for. We're at the Voyager goal, but it's always nice to add on a little bit of security blanket to that because we've already lost a couple patrons, bringing us even closer to not being at the Patreon goal for Voyager. So if that is something that you want to secure for the future, much like Shran secured that orb in the belly of his ship, you should give a couple of bucks to the patreon.com/The Penske File. And as always, a special thank you to our captain tier supporters, Tarek Latif, Joint Mango, Kyle Barrett, Mike Burnett, Sammy Custer, Andrew Charlog, Matt Ross, Michael Pond, Matt Cutler, Christian Pouch, Cardinal Doomsday, Nick Sergi. I realized I listened to this episode, or the past episode. I do read these names in the patron comments very quickly. I realized that as I was listening to me read it back. But there are so many of you guys, and which is fantastic, and we thank you very much. But I'm not trying to get through this to not do it, but there's just so many names. I do appreciate it. I apologize I read them so quickly.
We can do a Patreon episode where we just slowly read everybody's names.
I have capital M, little I, little K, little E, space. Matt Ross, Michael Pond, you get double whammy.
I knew someone named Mike once.
Mike Pond, communists, Yanks. You can listen to our Patreon coverage of, what the fuck was that? Omega Glory. To understand that one. Oh, I'm sure you all do. Christian Pouch, Cardinal Doomsday, Nick Sergi, Grim Santo, Sean, Bradley Killens, Dwayne Hackett, Kevin Reyes, Vault 13 Hero, Jordan Cooper, Darth Mosk, Russell Elge, HS28, Stephen Minton, Derek Zajac, Paula Roscoe, Jacob123, Point Extra G, Johnny Franceschi, Mike Harris, Captain Brazen, Eric's Antoine, Jakey's Gamer, Kevin Lowry, Nick the Rat, Corey Martin, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Groppler, John Zorn, Zane Majors, Dave Davies, Soylent Blue, Retail, Patrick Seba, Tom Hickey, Jose Hunters, EWNF Remixes, Captain McMunchausen, James McLennan, Mark C., Matt Houston, Jonas, Lokai,
Does he do a
remix
of Getaway? Earth, Wind, and Fire song? That's a great song.
I only know the one we danced to at the weddings. What is that? September? In September?
Yeah. Yeah.
Fields.
Getaway has a fantastic horn line at the beginning. Very good.
Tuvix Must Die, and Olivier Pardue. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for supporting the show, Captain or
After
otherwise.
the Love Is Gone. After the Love Is Gone. Very good song.
Yeah.
Slow jam, kind of yacht rocky. Good stuff.
Well, let's get ready to go on and on to our own thoughts, or patron thoughts first, I think. First, Proving Ground. Patrick Seba says, I still submit that Jeffrey Combs is spitting pigskin when he refers to humans, but I suppose that's too derogatory. Looking at those, well, he would probably call that against the Tellarites, who are actually piggy people. Looking at the Andorian uniforms, I suspect that a full HD render of this would be unkinder than TOS. They were wearing lace napkins, sure, but not hefty bags with leather cod pieces. Save your dancing lady boners, Talus. Reed's looking for something juicy yellow and with spines that double as roughage. Any episode of Shran gets the bump that helps this overcome the Enterprise crew's Captain Renault level shock to discover that there's treachery going on in his establishment. 3 Andorian lovesicles out of 5. Did we talk about Malcolm and that woman enough?
I mean, we didn't really talk about him that much. I hope she comes back because I was actually...
She was great. I liked her.
Yeah, she was excellent. I was kind of into their back and forth. I thought it was pretty well done. It was the most restraint they've showed with that stuff in this show.
You mean the sexual tension that's roiling underneath their discussion
like this
of
one
buttons?
This one didn't have that scene where they just abscond off to the torpedo bay to bang off screen.
I was expecting, he's like, it's a tight fit in this Jeffrey's tube. And he's cut to him like laying on top of her as they're like trying to put a screwdriver into the wall or something. It's like, no, it didn't happen. I thought the sexual tension was, in the way that you thought Archer was well portrayed, was probably the best portrayed version of that, where it's not completely overt, but it's there, obviously. It just didn't have the show pointing it out. I liked her. I know that plot generally exists just to give Malcolm and Archer a reason to get one over on Shran, but I did think that it was a nice supplemental story to Shran and Archer working their differences out in a similar story that this is.
I liked when she said, when they were talking about their family histories, and she was like, your father must be very disappointed in you.
Yeah.
And Reed's like, yeah, I think he is.
The other minor arc that we didn't talk about in this, but I enjoyed, was Shran going around giving everybody an Oprah talk. When he talks to Trip and he's like, your sister died. He's like, God. He's like, she did. He's like, my brother died. I know what it's like. I enjoyed those little moments. That's what I think that's what Combs brings to it, because the stuff Shran was saying was pretty like stupidly predictable in terms of that kind of stuff, but he brought a kind of pathos to it or something. Let's see. Nick the Rat says, Proving Ground, longest previously seen on ever. Wish they didn't show Shran in the cold open. Archer with the antenna would have been much more impactful. Tala sure makes my antenna blue. Is Andorian wine made of Andorians? We don't call it Earthling ale. Archerite is probably one of the most funny gags in all of Trek. Who sent them the schematics? Shran Atalis, was Mayweather or Philip Phlox in the episode? Proving Ground reaps the Combs bump. 4 out of 5.
I would like to. I don't know if it's issue a warning. But not everybody needs to make dick jokes now in their comments. We can thank Kyle for that. It's starting to disseminate out. Jesus, now even I'm doing it.
Inseminate? What the hell was there's something. Oh, the maybe outside of that pregnancy episode, which I thought was funny, but apparently people think that's offensive. This was the Shran pretending to be the Andorian mining crew, but also getting annoyed by the joke and then starting to fail at doing the thing because he got angry was really excellent. I thought that was really kind of funny, where Archer has to remind him that he's acting, and he's like, oh, right, yeah, I can't get angry at this guy.
That's also, I feel like, Jeffrey Combs is pulling that off. Yeah. He's very good. That
was funny. I like. And then even after it's over, we're not sure if he's made up this mining company, but his final line is like, no one speaks to the Andorian mining company.
That was very good.
Next one is, Cerulio says, Proving Ground. Before Enterprise premiered, the promotional material claimed that we would see the very beginnings of humans exploring the galaxy in the events immediately preceding the founding of the Federation. Since 10 years seemed pretty quick for the Andorians, Vulcans, Tellarites, and humans to all decide to form an interstellar government together, I expected we would see the Alliance members quite often, but I was wrong. Archer and Shran's partnership has been the only time we actually see how the Federation got created, and I always like a Shran episode because of it. I'm a pretty easy audience to please, and I like when we get to see the origin of something in a prequel, like apparently Starfleet's evil admirals were an Andorian contribution to the Federation. 4 out of 5. It's a good point. He's a general, though, I guess. Just I take your point, but it's the details. The devil's in the details. It's true. And we talked about that. I would have liked to have seen Federation stuff from the beginning. Point Extra G says, Jeffrey Combs doing anything is amazing, but I'm starting to think that Shran is my favorite role of his. There's a reason that so many different franchises have an ally that you can't trust fully. I wonder how Shran explained losing the probe to his superiors. This is one of the highlights of the season. Would you agree that Wayon is better than Shran? I don't know. We haven't finished the season or anything. I have just because Point Extra says that Shran might be his favorite role, which I can't disagree with, but I just think that Wayon is...
You can't disagree with it, but you'll tell him why he's wrong.
I can't disagree with liking Shran more, but I feel that Wayon is, like I said, there's a depth to Wayon that I don't think Shran has, really. DS9 was just a better written series, I think, about that stuff, but the Nebby bureaucrat who is also sycophantic all the time is kind of an unusual role, and Shran is just generic thug guy, which is not bad. He does a great job at it, but it's a different thing.
Yeah, I think Shran stands out not only because it's what we're currently watching, but also he's like the perfect amount of heightened, kind of over the top, without it going too far. Like, what's his name? The other one he plays on Deep Space Nine, the Ferengi guy.
The Ferengi Brunt.
He's way over the top, and to the point where it's like, yeah, this is fun, but, I don't need to see this every week. Shran is like the perfect dialed in setting for Jeffrey Combs's more over the top proclivities.
Yeah.
Whereas Shran, I think, is a more subtle portrayal. I think and he has more to do. I think.
Are you saying that Wayon is the more dialed in version?
No, Shran I think is the perfect setting for Jeffrey Combs's more over the top kind of sensibilities.
Yep.
He's heightened, but he's not too far over the top.
Yeah.
Wayon is a lot more subtle and nuanced in what he's doing and his role in the story and stuff. So I can see why Shran stands out to people over someone like Wayon, but I do think Wayon is probably a better written character.
Yeah, and I think in the context of Enterprise, Shran sticks out quite a bit, mostly just because of the performance there.
Yeah, and because he is a character,
right? Yeah,
on a show that is lacking characters. Yeah,
I know that Phlox wasn't in this one. I think Mayweather is. I think Archer tells
Mayweather is. Yes.
Yeah, I think he tells him to punch it. But that's a lot of Mayweather appearances are just him punching in something into the computer and then the ship goes there. It's a series that's really lacking in characterization, I think.
I was going to mention this earlier, but I'm surprised when you were talking about how traditionally the show has a vaguely militaristic group that shows up as an antagonist. How did we not notice? Maybe we did mention this at the time, but I forgot. How have we not mentioned how funny it is that in this season they just moved the vaguely militaristic group onto the ship with the Makos?
The Makos, yeah. They wanted to get closer to them.
Obviously, they didn't have to do anything with them, at least not up to this point. But that is pretty funny if you think about it, where it's like they keep running into these vaguely militaristic things, and this time it's like, let's just put them on the ship so they're there all the time.
Berman's Brandon. I love that vaguely militaristic group you guys did this season. He's like, which one? He's like, yes. I need more of that on the ship.
High collars. I need high collars and low zippers.
What is? Yeah. I think we've covered that enough for the characterization and everything. Latte Librarian says, why is Jeffrey Combs' makeup so much worse than the other Andorians? On the close-ups, it looked like pieces were flaking off of him. Give him some blue eyeliner, please. Yeah. 4 kilos of Archerite out of 5.
I did notice, though, so the guy that he talks to, his higher up, was not as all in as Jeffrey Combs was, because you could see that the pink of that dude's like eyelids.
Yeah, yeah.
Jeffrey Combs goes right up to the eyeball.
I assume it's allergies or scares or something. Maybe there's
maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because Combs even his eyelashes are blue. Like I was looking at his eyes. I'm like, oh my god, they painted his eyelashes.
Yeah, yeah. Just dunk your face in the blue tub of paint.
Yeah, they set the makeup gun to Shran and shoot him in the face.
Royo says, an episode that actually takes advantage of the fact that Enterprise is a prequel. Seeing the founding members of the Federation at each other's throats is frankly interesting, and it's a damn shame the show wasn't all that interested in world building. Still, Archer's the weak link here as he starts the episode so trusting that he berates his crew for wanting to take the reasonable precautions against the Andorians right before taking reasonable precautions against the Andorians. The man is bipolar to the extreme. I can't tell if the show wants him to be extremely clever or if it wants him to learn a lesson, but it seems that the show can't decide, so it achieves neither. Archer is trusting, but he isn't. He wants his crew to be more trusting, but they won't be. So it seems like the only character growth that's happening is with Shran, 3.5 out of 5. Matthew Ross says, Proving Ground, it's always good to see Shran and Jeffrey Combs doing the most untrustworthy snarling. However, despite the adventure to find the Xindi weapon, the Andorians' motivation to find the Enterprise to find the weapon I found to be a bit tenuous. Did they really need to fly all the way after Enterprise in an extremely hazardous portion of space instead of trying to reach out to the Xindi directly? The rest is the angry Archer and double-cross predictability. With this weapon, it's clear Earth and the Enterprise need better tech. A perfectly serviceable bridge episode. 3 laser balls out of 5. Cardinal Doomsday says, Talos should have given Reed a pineapple, then she could have successfully hacked the ship. Always good to see Shran, though, and I did enjoy his inner conflict. Travis Mayweather says, no Andorian ever called me pink skin. 3 Andorian mining consortiums out of 5. Yeah, it's, yeah, do you think Shran's inner conflict was appropriately gauged here? You liked that you didn't have Archer appealing to him at the very end, but you thought that there was enough Shran conflict, like inner conflict for him this episode?
Yeah, I think so. Because he was, they are reluctant. I mean, allies isn't even, I don't even know if you would use that word. It's getting closer every time he shows up. But he's working for his government and his people. He's not working for the betterment of the human race. And I think they play that line well enough where he's making a decision based on that, not based on his affection for Archer or whatever. He's it's almost more like a Ducat decision, but not as cynical as that. But I think it works well.
Yeah, he's a better person than Ducat. I think that one thing that I didn't stress enough is that I do think that this is a pretty subtle Enterprise episode in terms of how it's portraying what potentially could build into an alliance between these groups. So, for instance, it's like the Andorians and Shran are doing what they think is best for Andoria because they're relatively isolated at this point. There is no greater cause to be there. However, the conflict for Shran comes from the fact that he owes Archer, which is just the beginning stages of this reaching out of this sort of xenophobic, nationalistic, nativist outlook that all the species have at this point. And while they don't like each other, there is a working relationship being built. And it's a shame the show didn't do it anymore, because I thought that this one was a good step in showing how that would all process and like the kind of antagonism that they could have where it still feels believable that Archer and Shran are going to get over this, Like I thought that it was done well enough where I can understand after this is over, they can still become allies with each other and it's not a personal thing at the end of the day, I thought it was good. the show has not done any of that stuff. And I think that when they do it, shows like this explain why it would have been a good idea to do more of it if you're going to do it.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that they couldn't have done more of it up to this point because, it works. It's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about it going forward, I guess. Tom Hickey says, automatic +1 for Jeffrey Combs. The guy seems to have fun with these Trek characters, emoting through sometimes goofy makeup and prosthetics, and in turn, it's fun to watch. And with the Andorians, the fully functional antenna are always a cool detail. Where this episode in particular falters is when it moves away from the Enterprise and the Andorians and deals with anything Xindi. They sit, they talk, they test, they watch, they complain. When your big bad gets upstaged as an immediate threat by inert anomalies earlier in the episode, that's not great. Still, Jeffrey Combs, 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting this episode to go a little differently. I thought this was going to be, they're making their mad dash through the Expanse, and they were really going to go through run the gamut of what the Expanse has in store for them.
Yeah.
And that was going to be like the proving ground element for them. But this one, it was just like they hit one anomaly and it fucked the ship up.
Yeah. And they pulled them out of there. I like that effect sequence though of hitting the anomaly. I thought it was things are blowing up effectively. It has the little green force field that knocks Archer over or whatever.
I would love to see that sequence without the special effect because for some reason I was drawn to the one stunt guy who's like, okay, now you got to step back like you're surprised from the panel, like you're seeing this big green thing. Shuffle down. Okay, sparks. Okay, now jump over the thing.
Yeah. This green thing, it's impressive. Show fear. It's like it's like George Lucas talking to Jar Jar or something. Which do you prefer, the spheres or the Xindi?
I guess the spheres haven't really done anything yet. You're talking about the big spheres, like the gigantic
and the spheres
ones?
which are creating the anomalies.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like they kind of have to go hand in hand because, I don't know if the spheres really do anything on their own.
Do you think the Xindi know what the spheres are? I guess to clarify this, I don't know. I'm of the impression that the Xindi are not the sphere builders that they keep referring to.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking that they were, but at the same time, because of the spherical nature of their weaponry, I thought maybe there was some sort of connection there.
Yeah. I find that just the sphere mystery to me is much more interesting than the Xindi plot. I'm like, what are these spheres? These are kind of weird. Sure. Why? And we've seen enough of them. They went inside one. They landed on one. Those religious zealots got pissed off because they landed on one. It's like, oh, what's going on with these spheres? This is kind of interesting. The Xindi stuff just doesn't seem the same.
Yeah, it's just the spheres. There's no drive for it. Like there's no narrative drive. They're cool. It's a cool idea. I'm curious to see what ends up happening with them. But like by them, when I say they can't really exist by themselves, it's because there's nothing driving the Enterprise to figure out what they are or towards them. Well, they're there as a supplement to the Xindi stuff. Yeah. And obviously without the Xindi stuff, I don't really know what you do with them. But.
Is the show going to tie? We've been let down before by Enterprise doing this. Are the spheres have to tie into this somehow, right?
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not just a booby trap that's put out there for the ship to run into. I'm curious because I have a hard time understanding what the connection could be here, unless the spheres are somehow related to the Xindi thinking about what's going to happen to them. Is sphere related, and the sphere. Hopefully, I don't do something like the humans were the sphere builders, like an alien type storyline or something like that. But I have no idea.
I don't know. They are mysterious enough still that it's hard to track what the plan is. Yeah,
I'm at this point. I'm having a hard time understanding how they're going to combine. Not that they can't do it, but I don't really see any connection between the two of them. The Xindi haven't talked about them or anything. Kyle Barrett says, Proving Ground elevates Shran to fan favorite status and inserts such momentum and inspired conflict into the Xindi arc that it should have played out across multiple episodes. I agree. It should have played out across the first 10 episodes of this season.
Yes.
And into the Xindi arc. It should have played out across multiple episodes. Shran's appearance does a good job of linking the pre- and post-Xindi attack eras of the show, and him tricking the crew shows that the characters have slightly evolved since the last time they met. Reed wants to take Talos to his quarters and open her up like Christmas to see what color she is on the inside, but has also learned from past experiences to know that she's tricking him. Archer is still too trusting, but his once unfathomable pinheadery is now an intentional trait, and he too puts a backup in place in case he's manipulated. The only element I dislike is Trip, and I feel he should still be angry and want revenge, something Shran uses to trick him, maybe gaining access to the engine, and it's only then that he changes his attitude after seeing the trouble it's gotten them in, rather than having this be an off-screen character change. 4 surprisingly small Xindi weapons out of 5.
Hey, man, it's tough to be mad when you're at Margaritaville with DePaul every night.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Kyle, you're setting a bad example for everybody else.
I would agree. I agree with most of that. I don't have anything else to add. That's it. That's the final comment. Thank you, patrons, for leaving your thoughts about Proving Ground. We had a lot of 4 out of 5s on that one. Clay, what are you going to give Proving Ground?
I also am going to give it a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I agree. I like this one. This was a weird one because I think something to compare it to is Similitude, which is the Trip clone episode, right? Mm-hmm. Similitude is a much more interesting idea. But I think this episode is almost, it's not as good, but I was engaged by this one more, you know? I think once you get a little distance from the episode, looking back is interesting because I think what was strange about Similitude is that I liked the concept, but I wasn't really engaged by the episode. You know, I wasn't like,
sure.
Oh, what a great thing going on here. This one felt different. It just felt like it was when it was over, I was sad that the Andorians had to leave. You know, I was like, please come back and continue on this journey with the Enterprise because I think you're adding something to it.
Yeah, I think the thing that stopped me from giving this a 5, well, on top of the fact that it's just, I wouldn't call this like an all-timer or anything. Yeah. I think the thing is this is what every episode of the show should be.
Right.
This is kind of like what the baseline for this show and its characterizations and interactions should be this episode.
Yeah.
So that's why it's a perfectly serviceable story that with a couple twists at work and really good performances, it stands out because it kind of makes you a little bit bummed out that the show isn't this more often.
Right. Yeah. And it should be this by this point, I think. There's no reason that the show is not. Yeah, that's it. We'll both give it 4s. Proving Ground. It was a good one. It was an interesting Xindi episode. Everyone's saying that the Xindi arc gets better in the second half. We'll see where that comes from. We're in the second half right now. Clay, do you have anything
Just got to read the first 5 books. Books 6 through 8 are fantastic. 9 through 12 are terrible, but 13.
He comes back to form.
Yeah. It's when the Mother of Stones shows up.
Patreon.com/The Pensky File. Thank you very much for listening and supporting the show, guys. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
I don't know what week we're in, but on Rotten Horror Picture Show, we have The Abominable Dr. Phibes probably out at this point.
Last week, I think. Yeah.
Last week.
Mm-hmm. This is a badass this week.
Badass is back with coverage of season 4 or the new Batman Adventures, where all the designs and everything are different. Mm-hmm. And on Patreon this month, it's almost the end of the month. Will it still be May when this comes out?
No, last month last month is 5, I guess. We're in the new month. You'll have 6, but 5 will just have come out.
Yeah, so we will be up to Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, on our my coverage with Amanda of the Friday the 13th series.
When did you record the first Badass of this season? Was it a long time ago?
It was a while ago, yeah.
Okay. I can't remember specifically what Sean said, but there was he said something. I was like, is this recorded in like 2018? It wasn't
that far back.
It was so long ago.
It was I honestly don't know. We haven't been able to get into a
rhythm with it.
A rhythm yet. We're like just about to get there. So I wanted to wait until I had like 3 or 4 episodes done so we could have a little bit of breathing room.
No, that's fine. I was just because I didn't know when you had started, and whatever he said in that, I was just like, wow, I feel like this is a long time ago with what he's talking about.
Well, hold on 1 second. I'll look it up really quick here.
Because I don't think I have not seen that new Adventures of Batman show. I don't think, unless it was mixed in with like WB replays with the Superman stories or whatever.
Yeah, it was. It originally it debuted as like an hour block with the new Superman show, and I don't know where it ended up in reruns and stuff. We recorded that on March 14th, so 2 months ago.
Okay.
Not as far back as I thought.
Yeah, not that bad.
It was further back.
Yeah, I thought it would have been like, maybe even last year or something. But that was a long time ago. That's it. The badass is there. Dr. Phibes, is that the Ron horror?
The Abominable Dr. Phibes, starring Vincent Price. It's a very fun, campy movie that's actually kind of a precursor to Saw in a lot of ways. I recommend checking out. It's not available to stream, I don't think, but you can find it on YouTube for no money.
Is Saw on the list? Must be.
I don't know, actually.
I imagine it would be. It should be. None of the sequels, but at least the original Saw should be on there. I'd be expecting that, or I wouldn't be disappointed to see it on there.
That's kind of a hard one to control F4
it
because
is.
Those 3 letters show up in a lot of
popular
stuff.
word. Popular arrangement?
Like Texas Chainsaw. It looks like it is not on here.
No, that's too bad.
I would say we will probably do that one as a wild card. I was thinking,
you'll do all the Saw movies on Patreon. 1 to 13.
I actually was thinking about that once we finish Friday the 13th, but I don't know if I have the stomach for that.
Yeah,
that's a lot of
it's a lot of head
gore.
Crushing going.
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Well, you guys can check it all out. It's at thepenskyfile.com. It's on YouTube, all that stuff, the usual things. Patreon.com/thepenskyfile if you want to support us there. I think we're done. Thank you very much for listening. The next Star Trek episode is Strategem, I think. Is that how you pronounce this? Yeah, Strategem. Strategem. It's got Degra in it. So we're going to learn more about him. Thank you very much for listening, guys. We'll see you later.